So as people are coming in, I'll just say welcome everybody to today's session on trauma-informed lawyering. We're so glad you're here. You're a cast of thousands. We've had people tune in from across the country, from community legal centres, legal aid commissions, mental health review tribunals. We've got lots of people with lived experience and carers in the room. We are really excited that you've all made time today. I'd like to start by paying respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of the land on which I'm standing today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to acknowledge the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices and resilience to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The ability to recognise and respond to our clients' trauma is what will make us effective in the important work we do. My name is Jen Chen, and I'm the manager of the National Legal Aid With You project. Thank you for joining us today to talk about trauma-informed lawyering. I'd like to acknowledge the people here with lived and living experience of trauma, mental health, mental distress, and suicidality, families, carers, and kin. Our project is co-designed, meaning that at all aspects of the project, we are partnering with people with lived experience, and we deeply appreciate and respect the knowledge and the rich and diverse perspectives that lived experience has brought to our project. We are discussing issues related to trauma and sharing personal lived experiences today, so please look after yourselves and seek support if you experience distress as a result of the content. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Louise Glanville, Chair of National Legal Aid and CEO of Victoria Legal Aid.
Thanks very much, Jennifer, and it is terrific to be with you all online here today. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the different lands we're meeting on. I'm down on Wathrong lands near Geelong, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and note that their lands have never been ceded. I also think of the important work we're doing here in Victoria in relation to not only the Uruk inquiry, but to the work that government is committed to in relation to treaty more generally, to support the truth and the truth-telling that we've all heard and understood to date and what will continue into the future. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Delightful, as I said, to be with you. And I'd like to start by saying that really the thing for me that's most particularly important about this project is it was done very, very collaboratively and involved many people from many different backgrounds. I think long gone is the era where lawyers, for example, and we have many lawyers, and of course we love them all at Victoria Legal Aid, but throughout the country at National Legal Aid. But we know now that some of the best work is done through having both legal advocacy and non-legal advocacy, legal service delivery and non-legal service delivery. And I think this particular project is a really good example of the coming together of the two, where we can learn from each other, but that lived experience is at the very centre of our thinking and understanding. You only have to, I think, sit in watch duty lawyers at work to understand that the numbers of people they see in very short periods of time is in fact a good example of how we need to understand trauma more thoroughly, and not only trauma, of course, for the people that are experiencing the issues that we're raising, but also for practitioners in how they do their work. It helps us think about whether our models are right, whether you can ever really deal with people's trauma when you have 4 or 5 minutes to figure out what's going on for them. And it encourages us to think not only about the health and well-being of clients, most importantly, and those who use our services, but also of our own staff who are delivering those services, and in fact to think of the health of the systems and the sectors in which we work, and how it might be that we should think about reforming what we do, changing the way we do things, if in fact it is not, the process is not one which can really assist when that's very necessary. This is quite challenging work, of course, because many things are not in our control for being able to make the sort of shifts and changes that we would wish to see. But this particular trauma-informed organisational toolkit for me, with you, really does give us some great indications and some great lessons personally, but also more generally for how we take up our work and how we think about the nature of the work that we do. I think the era has gone to where we think of, sort of trauma symptoms as part of mental health disorders or whatever. I think we've come to adopt a much broader, more holistic approach, which there are many online who can talk much more eloquently than I can about this. But it is apparent to me that it is a real paradigm shift from thinking not just about the person but themselves and who they are, but strongly listening to what they tell us about their situation, their life, and their experiences in the legal assistance sector. I think this shift towards more trauma-informed lawyering, firstly, I would say encourages people to, one, read this great kit and have a look at it and see what it's telling you. But two, I think it will ensure that when we are designing new services and programs, when we are opening up perhaps new offices, when we are getting funding for something that's new and different than we've done before, that we've been advocating for with government at both state or a federal level, we are conscious from the very outset of the need for clients to be involved and those with lived experience to be involved in the design and development of those areas. And in fact, this is what this project has shown. It has been a practical application, in my view, of that particular point, that it's about inclusion, it's about recognition, it's about listening and working on things together, as distinct from having a more didactic method that perhaps historically may have worked well for us, but may not have worked well for us in many instances. And this is quite a different approach. I also think that it is important when we look at, for example, the way in which coronial matters roll out and those sorts of things, that this is really helpful in terms of the way in which we engage with those who might not be the client in the process, but who sit around that client and who experience also their own trauma, often in terms of what's occurring. It's an ability to be able to talk with people about how things are going to occur and what they could expect, and for them to ask questions of what is going to happen here in a way which I think is far more embracive of all our agency for all players in our systems in terms of how we do our work. And so I think it's only with projects like with you that we can actually really ensure that we're as effective as we can possibly be in both our legal practice and our non-legal practice. So with those few words, Jen, I'll thank once again you for your work and for all of those on this line today that have contributed to the terrific outcome, which is with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. And to echo Louise's comments that this is social justice and transformative trauma-informed lawyering is really a team sport. We have an amazing lineup of speakers to follow Louise. So now we will have Rachel Thomas, a lived experience expert, tell us her story. We have Hamish McLachlan, Legal Director of Fitzroy Legal Service. We have a video of our recent launch at Parliament House by the Commonwealth Attorney General. And we have Dr. Chris Maley, Associate Professor of La Trobe Law School, who led the team that drafted this toolkit after seeing best practice across the country. So without much further ado, we'll have questions and we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. So without much further ado, Rachel.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'd like to pay my respect to the people of the Wurundjeri land from the Kulin Nation, which I'm coming from today, and all the First Nation lands which you're coming from today. I acknowledge the lands remain unceded and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm reading what I have to say today because I have a neurological disorder and you want to make sure that I remember my words. Through my 20s, I used to hide under desks and chairs for up to 7 hours at a time, not blinking or speaking, terrified. I was safe. I was dissociated with trauma responses from severe trauma of different kinds, which I lived throughout my childhood. I've had a lot of therapy and spent a lot of time living in an institution and psychiatric wards and hospitals. I've had 2 family court cases, 2 AAT cases, and I've been an applicant for a successful intervention order through Legal Aid. The court cases I accessed legal aid in were all high-stress situations. I'm now in a wheelchair with a neurological disorder, but I don't look like I used to hide under desks and chairs for up to 7 hours at a time. People in legal services don't know when they email or meet a client like me that that's my history. I also used to be a receptionist, secretary, and personal assistant at a car sales dealership. This would seem more believable to someone engaging with me these days. However, I'm still the survivor of severe trauma. I'm just much better at hiding my wounds. Trauma-informed practice assumes that most, if not all, people you work with have experienced some kind of trauma. Therefore, it's important to approach everyone in a trauma-informed manner. That means people and organizations are geared to recognize, understand, and reduce the impacts of trauma, utilizing communication and processes which are safe, responsive, collaborative, empowering, trustworthy, and which give choices to the person you're interacting with. This profoundly positively affects so many layers of everyone's experience in whatever pursuit they're following. It helps prevent negative and unsafe layers of experience and outcomes and keeps people functioning at their best. In my experience with the lawyer who had a trauma-informed approach with me, I felt safe. I could think more clearly and think of words easier. I trusted her decisions and was happy to follow her lead, even though it wasn't all I expected. I worked hard for her when she needed information about my case, and I was able to get it to her swiftly because I wasn't dealing with triggers about my trauma. I was calm at court with her. I presented very well and was having a good outcome. When I had a lawyer who wasn't trauma-informed, I was more highly stressed about the case. I didn't trust her decisions. I panicked and had a trauma response and complained to her in an uncharacteristic emotional outburst. I was highly anxious at court and was dissociating and having trouble hearing and remembering everything that was being said. I couldn't even find my way around the courts, which I'd been to numerous times before. I was slower at getting paperwork back to her. I felt afraid of my lawyer. It made a big difference, the approach the 2 lawyers took doing the same job. This was actually in the same case, with one lawyer needing surgery and another taking over. On top of my trauma, I now have a neurological disorder where my neural pathways fail to go through my brain's command center when I'm particularly overloaded or overwhelmed. When that happens, I experience neurological symptoms from non-epileptic seizures to paralysis to speech loss, etc. Anytime I experience these neurological symptoms, they can remain and stay as a new permanent lifelong disability, like my already partial paralysis. So having a trauma-informed approach with someone who has a disability like this is crucially important to help keep the level of overload down. You simply don't know who you're interacting with when you get a new client, and you don't know the risks of not being trauma-informed. It helps me avoid further permanent physical disabilities. Your client might never even tell you about their trauma or their risks surrounding it for them. You might not even be aware of the risks. So thank you for being here today and thank you for learning more about trauma-informed practice. Whether you're a lawyer, a manager, a career engagement officer, a secretary, receptionist, a remote hearing social worker, etc. It's essential all legal assistance sector workers who come into contact with clients be trauma-informed. It affects your work environment, legal outcomes, and the safety of you and those you work for. This is a vital program in the legal sector, which is part of a culture shift towards a more trauma-informed future in the legal assistance sector. Thank you for hearing me today. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable perspective, Rachel. We all really appreciate it. And I'll hand over to Hamish now.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands that we're all calling in from. For me, it's also the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, so I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also thank you so much, Rachel, for your contribution. I thought when I was joining this panel that hearing what you had to say would definitely be a highlight, and that's been proved so true. Very generous of you to share your story, and it's always just so valuable for lawyers to hear from people about what it's actually like to receive legal services, because when we do it day in, day out, it can become second nature. And so to hear what it's actually like for the other person and that interaction is just invaluable. So we can't thank you enough. So as Jennifer said, my name's Hamish McLaughlin. I'm the legal director at Fitzroy Legal Service here in Melbourne. It's a really great honour for me to be invited to speak about the toolkit, which is, I have to say, just a very impressive and amazing resource, and also made by such esteemed people, Chris included, who's on the call. In terms of me, my background, I spent about 10 years as a mental health and disability lawyer, working with Louise at Victoria Legal Aid. And so as part of that role, we would outreach into the psychiatric units at public mental health at public hospitals throughout Melbourne. And I have to say, through that long experience, I really saw how trauma was not acknowledged or responded to by mental health systems. In fact, many of the systems and the practices seemed expertly designed to be unresponsive to trauma. And this is something that we were dealing with day in, day out. And I think we were quite attuned to. However, it wasn't until some way through my career there that at Legal Aid, and in part this was due to the introduction of services like IMA, which Louise mentioned earlier, and Chris has had some engagement in, that were much more sophisticated about reflective practice and looking at how they were practicing, that we as lawyers really turned the mirror back on ourselves and thought about, well, how are we acknowledging trauma in terms of doing mental health law, and how are we responding to it? And really, I think we had a long way to go, but I think it's great that that journey started, and resources like this toolkit can help us on that journey to really improve. In terms of Fitzroy Legal Service, being trauma-informed is really, really critical and central to everything that we do. And I have to say, I've only been here for 6 months, so I feel like I'm like one of those people who turns up at an award ceremony like the Oscars and says, you know, I'm receiving this on other people's behalf, but I take no credit for any of these innovations that have so expertly been implemented at Fitzroy. And by no means are we perfect, but it really is central from what I've seen in my short-term time here, and that's really great to see. So some of the things, and I've been asked, I should say, to reflect on how we do trauma-informed lawyering in practice. And so some of the things that we do here that are called out in the toolkit, there's really three things. The first is co-locating services. So we have a number of services here at Fitzroy where we co-locate with other services. So we have a full-time dedicated lawyer at St Vincent's Public Hospital here in the homeless and mental health team. And that's really critical for trauma-informed lawyering because it enables people to be treated to have a legal service somewhere maybe where they feel more comfortable and also not having to engage with as many services. We similarly have dedicated lawyers at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre in Collingwood, which really is a one-stop shop for people's justice needs and enables us to make referrals and respond to people's non-legal needs in a way that's seamless and doesn't add to the burden on people when they're interacting with services. We have a similar thing at the Connie Ben Centre, which is a maternal and child hub that's connected to one of the housing estates here in Fitzroy. And we also have our drug outreach lawyer program, which has been running for over 20 years and outreaches to various alcohol and other drug services. And the main, so many people on this call know better than me, but one of the main drivers of people being drug users is having trauma. So we are dealing with people who have a history of that. And one of the main things we do with the drug outreach lawyer program is we come to where people are and we're highly flexible, which has proved to be important. The second way that we try and implement the principles of trauma-informed lawyering at Fitzroy is through integrated practice. So we have a service called Willow, the Women's Integrated Legal Outreach. And what we have there is it's a specific service to try and avoid criminalisation and incarceration of women. And we have a senior women's criminal lawyer who works alongside two social workers. So this will be a model that's familiar to many people, but that's really critical for people. Being able to have professionals working together means that people don't have to share their story multiple times. And so where possible, we have meetings between the social workers and the lawyers and the clients. And there's also information sharing protocols that enable information to be shared so that people don't have to be re-traumatized by telling their story again and again. The third thing I wanted to call out is our lived experience work. So we try and make lived experience central to everything that we do. And we've had a number of projects in that realm recently. We had the Women Transforming Justice Group, which began as a program of the Darebin Community Legal Centre, which merged with Fitzroy Legal Service in 2019. So this was groundbreaking and multi-component program, which sought to provide an innovative and urgent response to, at the time, we were seeing like really, really rapidly increasing women's incarceration in Victoria, and to advocate for decarceration, both at a systemic level and an individual level. Really importantly, as part of that, we had the Women's Leadership Group that made decisions about which law reform priorities we should pursue, one of which was bail law reform, which we're happy to say has been much improved following the advocacy of many, many groups in that space. A current one we also have at the moment is the Work Without Barriers project. So this is a direct employment program that we have for people who've lived experience of trauma that gives rise to barriers to employment. And we employ them in our service currently as part of staff, which gives us a richer diversity of staff and gives us, therefore, much better outcomes when we're trying to come up with better ways to run our services. And the final one I wanted to talk about was Voices for Change, which is a group run, and as mentioned in the talk, which is a group run by and for people with brain injury and experience of the criminal justice system who want to improve the criminal justice system. Voices for Change is really critical in a lot of the co-design work we do. And so we're going to highlight some of the group work that they did, which is an example of two things. One, great co-design, and two, an important aspect of trying to make our services more trauma-informed, which is that they developed a video that we send out to all of our new clients that explains to people the process of having a lawyer and what it means to have a lawyer, and very importantly, who's in charge when you have a lawyer, which is not the lawyer, it's the client. So Jennifer's going to play that video for you now. Thank you.
When you go to a lawyer, listening to and getting the information you need in the right way is important. Everybody communicates in a different way. You can tell your lawyer the best way to talk to you. You can do this even before your meeting. You might want to tell the lawyer to speak slowly, that you need an interpreter, to write things down, to read documents out loud, to use pictures, or diagrams like charts or graphs, or to use examples when explaining big words that lawyers might use. The lawyer will communicate with you in the way you want. During the meeting, the lawyer will ask questions, and you can tell them more about what you need. A lawyer's job is to listen to you, tell you about the law, and make sure you understand how the law can work for you. They will tell you what you can do about your legal problem. You should be treated with dignity, kindness, and respect. Your meeting is a time for you to ask questions, no matter how big or small. You can prepare a list before the meeting or ask questions as you go. If you have paperwork that you think is useful, you could also bring it to the meeting. To do their job well, lawyers will ask lots of questions too. They might ask questions about you that are private. They're just trying to understand what's going on, so they know the best way to help. If you are unhappy, tell your lawyer. You can ask to take a break. Legal appointments can sometimes feel rushed. If your meeting is about to finish and you still have questions, tell the lawyer you need more time. Not all lawyers will be able to go with you to court or talk to other people for you. Sometimes they can just give you legal advice. The lawyer might not be able to give you lots of choices, but they should listen to your story, work with you, and find out the best way they can help you. When you have talked to the lawyer and have enough information to know your choices, you can decide what to do next. Sometimes it's hard to make a decision. When your choices don't seem very good, the lawyer will help you understand the different choices and help you make the right decision. Remember, you are the boss, and it's you who is making the decisions.
Thank you very much, Hamish. And we've got a video now of our toolkit launch at Parliament House. This National Legal Aid project enables trauma-informed, rights-based legal services to clients experiencing distress, mental ill health, and suicidality. We've partnered with people who've lived these experiences from the very beginning, in the project's governance, consultations, and drafting, review, and are now spreading the word about trauma-informed lawyering. Thank you for being so generous with your wisdom and resilience in shaping this project and this shift for our sector. The With You project consists of training that will be rolled out for the entire legal assistance sector next year, as well as the toolkit being launched today.
As Attorney General, I am committed to ensuring that vulnerable Australians receive the legal support that they need. Strengthening and supporting the legal assistance sector is one of my key priorities. The resource is intended to be accessible to approximately 170 Commonwealth funded legal assistance providers across Australia, The toolkit is informed by people with lived experience and provides practical guidance for legal assistance services on all aspects of trauma-informed, rights-based organisational design. You support the vulnerable and disadvantaged when facing the most difficult stages of their lives, and you have the ability to prevent people's problems from escalating. Legal assistance not only helps solve legal problems, but can touch many other aspects of a person's life. Legal assistance services can reduce the impact of domestic and family violence, reduce the need for out-of-home care for children, and indeed improve mental health outcomes.
And I'll hand over to Dr. Chris Maley.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here today. I'm on Wurundjeri country and extend my respects to elders past and present. I think the involvement of First Nations people and communities in this project is one of the things that I'm so proud of. So many different things about this project, but the fact that we were able to go to Alice Springs and Catherine and Darwin, and we were in Western Australia as well, in Kalgoorlie, and meeting with people from all across the country, into every jurisdiction, and found examples of trauma-informed practice in every jurisdiction. So that's what this toolkit is. It's not something that we just made up. It's us going around the country asking what is working, what's trauma-informed, and we spoke to over 500 people, including many people who'd used legal services and had trauma histories or who'd experienced mental distress. Many lawyers, other stakeholders, a whole range of different people. And so that's what we've got here, is this kind of collection of different best practices. And I think in some areas, and I think you listen to Hamish speak, there's some good examples in that service. The way the toolkit's designed is to be relevant to wherever your service is at. So we know that people are doing good things organically, and I think Rachel kind of referred to that in her talk, that some lawyers are just able to do this as part of their work, and it just kind of comes naturally. Others of us have to work quite hard at it to develop those skills. And it's the same for some services. Some services are already on their journey, others are just starting their journey. And the toolkit's really about providing a range of inspiration, so that wherever your service is up to on that journey, you can pick up the toolkit, have a read through it, and consider implementing or being inspired by some of those practices that we were able to collect. I might just touch on, I know these have already been referred to, but just to give a sense of what this might look like in practice, the lived experience elements, there's a whole range of different ways in which lived experience might be introduced to improve trauma-informed legal services. But in my own experience, I've seen this so profoundly. As lawyers, we know that language is and that words are really powerful. That's the whole premise of our profession. And as a service manager, I sometimes struggled to get my staff to be using the kind of language that I think was most appropriate for how we were talking about clients or people we work with, consumers, however, there's a good example, isn't there, of the power of language. The one thing that changed that instantly overnight was having lived experience peer workers in the service. Everybody started using the most appropriate language all of the time, because it was important. You had to do it because the person was there. And so I don't think I've ever seen a service culture change quite so quickly as with the introduction of peer workers. And some of these things are longer term goals, and obviously language is only one part of that cultural change, but you can see these changes really quickly and really effectively. I've seen the same thing many times, and Hamish gave this example of the mental health lawyers working with the mental health advocates and seeing how they engage in reflective and reflexive practices, and how lawyers can learn from that. And that's very well documented in studies that I've undertaken and other people have undertaken, that both lawyers and social workers or peer workers or financial counselors or whoever it is in that integrated practice all benefit. They all love it. It improves everybody's well-being substantially. And it also means that you can focus on the lawyering because you've got somebody else to do more of the social work stuff that often legal assistance lawyers end up doing. So it just works. It's just, you know, it is sometimes you have to have an upfront resource investment, but it does mean that you can do better work. I think another good example, and I think I've seen this on a case that Hamish worked on actually, is that when you're trying to do public interest litigation, if you're not being trauma informed, you're not going to have the client stay with you for that long, arduous journey through those higher court processes. So if you want to do that big case that changes the law and has that really long-term impact and sets defining precedent, you're going to need to be trauma informed so that people want to work with you so that you can actually do those cases they require as lawyers. They require to be there. So that's what we were thinking about when we're putting this toolkit together. It's not about doing something fundamentally different. It's about doing what we are already doing better and about building on what we're doing well and borrowing from other people. So I think for those of you who are looking through the toolkit and thinking, oh, well, what can I do here? You know, how can I change this? There is an appetite increasingly through funding bodies, so through law reform commissions, for example, or through other grant issuing bodies, for example, to make these sorts of changes. And so you could look into the toolkit and go, oh, there's these great cards that they've developed in the Northern Territory and Western Australia that you can use to communicate more effectively with your clients. Well, they're probably not going to be relevant. They're not going to have the same language or the same cultural context as if you're in far north Queensland or in Western New South Wales or wherever you are. But you can look at those cards and go, oh, maybe we could develop something like that here and apply for a small grant to develop those, and then you can be using them in your own practice. So there's a whole range of different things that you can do that are in the toolkit. And I encourage people to have a look, think creatively, be inspired, and see if you can find something useful that's going to improve your own practice, make your own job easier, and improve outcomes for your clients.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. So we do have some time for questions now, and while people are dropping their questions in the chat, I guess I'll just reflect on personally what has been said so far that's had a real impact on me. So Louise's views on how trauma-informed integrated legal services really is the way of the future. I thought what Rachel said about how we'll never see the full wide-ranging impacts of our actions as lawyers, both positive impacts of being trauma-informed and potential harms that we're perpetuating if we're not trauma-informed. I thought Hamish's reflections on the impact of a whole system causing further trauma was interesting, as well as the clear way that his CLC has responded by being tailored to the needs of particular groups in the way that they do co-location, lived experience, integrated practice. I thought everything was so tailored to each particular client group. I want to take the opportunity to thank Chris for his incredible dedication to traveling all around the country, collecting best practice. And I thought his reflections on the flexibility and the broad application of the toolkit, as well as the transformative impact of lived experience, was really, really helpful. So in terms of some of the questions, Louise, you had there was a question for you around, are there evidence-based methods at Victoria Legal Aid to talk to people with intellectual, cognitive, and learning disabilities?
Sorry about the muting. Just to say that thank you to the questioner for this great question. And I'd have to say that I think if you looked at our disability action plan, we are very cognizant of, as the video showed really, of the importance of communicating with people in ways that they find best to communicate in. To me, that is the sort of the core point here. Can I say we use methods that are evidence-based? Well, it's an individual's evidence that I'd like to think is the best basis for how we communicate. But if you're suggesting more broadly what we look at to think about the best ways of communicating with people, I think we're sort of on a journey in this space, and I couldn't say with hand on heart that we've done lots of work in this area. But I think the starting point for that work, and if you look at our disability action plan, you will see this, is to really think about how clients say, how users of our services say they would wish to communicate. And we learn from the lived experience experts in our own organisation and our panels of consumer advocates in a range of ways about the evidence that is out there that indicates the way this is best done. So I hope that answers your question, but I'm very happy if you wanted to email me. If you needed more information, I would source that for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Louise. And what a great reflection on the evidence of the client themselves being a really strong and important form of evidence. We have this question, I think, is both for Louise and Hamish and Chris. Are there any plans to integrate consumer representation as a standard in steering committees on board and other policy and decision-making bodies?
Well, I'm happy to start. Or Chris, you go. Very happy for you to go.
Oh, well, despite Louise, you underplaying the thinking that VLA has done there, I don't think there's any question. The toolkit really shows that VLA is leading legal assistance sector practice in that area. There's some other really good examples. I think the With You project is one of the is the first nationally co-designed project. So there's some real change afoot there. And as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure I'm the person who's done the most thinking about this, that Victoria Legal Aid has undertaken the first co-design from the ground up of any legal service that we were able to identify. So if anyone has found any other examples of fully co-designed legal services, then please let me know. But certainly VLA is doing some excellent work in that space. I don't think there's any. I mean, I would have loved to just legislate the toolkit and everybody now has to do it, but I don't think there's any plans for a standard. I don't think we're going to have a kind of a quality assurance mechanism anytime soon that requires this. The closest thing we'll get is to see it reflected in funding agreements. And so if the government says you have to co-design this service, which is effectively what happened with one of the Victoria Legal Aid services, then that's when we'll see it happen. Sorry, Louise, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I think from a board perspective, and of course VLA does have a board that's appointed by government through the Attorney General. Increasingly, we understand the importance of not only being diverse, not only having First Nations representation on our board, which we now have, but also more generally learning from those who use our services at the board level. So we recently participated, I've just forgotten who ran it, but it was a great experience where we had the consumer representative who she had a disability herself, and she came and spent time with our board over a period of months and actually watched what the board did and gave feedback to the board on issues and different ways of doing things. I found this hugely exciting and hugely productive and informative. She was a terrific young woman, and I thought her contributions were very important for our organisation to take on, and our chair, Bill Jabor, certainly thought the same. She participated in the meeting. She gave her thoughts on issues that the board was talking about too. And I really just think this is a more general piece about we have to be very inclusive with our governing structures. We have to think about how much better a board or a steering committee or a project group is when it has the input of those who have lived experience, those who have used services, and those who should be in every single way at the centre of everything we do, whether we're governing, whether we're building a new premise, whether we're delivering a new service, whether we're giving legal advice or non-legal information. All these roles are important for people with lived experience to be in and to be able to assist us to be continuously better and improving on what we do.
Thank you. And Hamish, a question for you. Any advice about trauma-informed lawyering without risking stepping outside of the role of a lawyer and overservicing clients or acting like a counsellor? So I guess I'd like to reflect that this is an attitude that we come across quite often in the With You project. Lawyers saying, that's not my job, or I'm not trained as a psychologist. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, well, it's not trauma informed to act like a counsellor if you're not a counsellor, I guess is the main point. So that's not, I guess, what the idea is. How do you risk, you shouldn't be acting outside of your role. It's not that you'll start providing social work services or counselling services. It's about how can you provide a legal service in a way that is responsive to the fact that, particularly in the legal assistance service, probably a majority of the people that you see will have this attribute. And I would probably just encourage you to have a look at the toolkit because it goes through some quite practical ways in which you can tailor your lawyering. That's when you're seeing an individual client. The other part of that is making sure that you have the systems that are set up so that you can get those other professionals involved that are needed, for example, a counsellor or a social worker, and you can do it in a way that isn't re-traumatizing or that is responsive to people's needs. So yeah, it's about it's not about overstepping your role. It's about getting the people involved that person needs and doing it in a way that is most responsive to where they're at.
Thank you. And Rachel, this question's for you. How can legal assistance services better support clients with multiple disabilities?
I would start with the premise that, in my opinion, everybody with disabilities has experienced trauma. You know, whether it's through medical trauma or you know, trauma that just from their disabilities, from having a disability. So being trauma informed is essential as a foundation. With physical disabilities, access keys are very important, and they're underutilized. Access keys are a document which specifies in places that people have to physically go what physical accessibility features are available in those spaces. And this document allows people with physical disabilities or neurodiversity, etc., to be able to choose for themselves if this place meets their accessibility needs. It empowers them to decide if this is accessible for them or not. And it also empowers them to ask for any changes that need to be made that are further. Sorry, I have difficulty finding words. So access keys are really important, and also asking people, what are your needs?
Thank you. And this question is for all of our panelists. Can you please offer some suggestions on how a legal provider who doesn't have relevant lived experience can connect with a client who's experienced trauma?
I'll leave it to Hamish.
I was going to leave it to Rachel. Rachel, do you want to start off?
I would be kind. I would be trauma informed, which covers a lot of this. You don't have to be traumatized to be able to connect with someone who's lived through trauma. It's not about bringing out your trauma and comparing traumas. It's about the way that you work with someone, giving them choices, being collaborative, things like this, and connecting with them on a human level. They're humans. just like you would connect with any other person is how I would connect with somebody who's experienced trauma. Thank you. That's a great question.
Mm.
Thank you. And I might take this question. So we've had a question about whether or not the toolkit addresses issues of capacity, supported and substituted decision-making, including the involvement of family and carers in decision-making and access to information. So thank you for your question, Jonathan. The answer is absolutely. We spoke to a lot of carers, supporters, family and kin through the national consultations, and that was a really important finding, that often carers feel shut out of the process, especially if the client doesn't give consent for the lawyer to speak to the carer. And I think that often there hasn't been strong communication on why the lawyer doesn't speak to the carer, for example, how their professional obligations come into play, and how they can be more how legal services can be more trauma informed in providing carers with relevant services and information around that. So thank you for your advice, and that is definitely in the toolkit as well as in the training. So I might just wrap up there. I can see that there are still so many questions. There's a lot of engagement, and we will get back to you if you've asked a question that we haven't been able to read out today.
Jen, can I just butt in for 1 minute? It's Louise. There was a great question there, which is how to ensure the lawyers representing the NDIA are trained in a trauma-informed lawyering. I just couldn't not address that, given my history with the NDIA.
Please.
But I do think it's really important that we send this kit to Rebecca Falkingham, who's the CEO of the National Disability Insurance Agency, and that we do seek to speak to their legal counsel, both internally, but also to ensure that those they brief externally are aware of this tool. I think we have this fantastic kit. It's really our obligation to distribute it very broadly across, I think, government departments and government agencies, particularly at the federal level, after we've heard from the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, saying how important it is to him. I think we have to take that up seriously, and we have to distribute it very broadly across the Commonwealth, but also across the states as well, and territories, in terms of who they are briefing and how informed those lawyers are in relation to issues of not only their own trauma, but the trauma of those they're working with every single day. So I just thought that would be a good point to make, and National Legal Aid will undertake to do that.
Fantastic, thank you. And I couldn't agree more, obviously, that this toolkit has such a wide application, and that we should all do our best to spread the good word. And as a matter of fact, the Australian Pro Bono Centre put our toolkit on their global pro bono website. So we've gone global, gone international. But I want to just really close today by saying thank you so much again to all of our guest speakers for bringing your valuable, diverse perspectives. And thank you for all the really engaged questions from the crowd. This is, again, part of a really important conversation, and we would love for everyone to engage with our community of practice. Kicking off next year, we'll send around the link so that you can subscribe. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to continue learning from people with lived experience, carers, experts from all around the country and in all relevant sectors. So the With You project, of course, is this toolkit from the sector for the sector, but it's also training that'll be freely available across the sector, rolling out next year. So please watch this space. We have over 500 subscribers, but we would love for you to get in touch. And so go well. Thank you all for the important work that you do, and please get in touch.
Thank you.